Okay, so here it is, our Duofold Junior Streamline. We're just going to try and inspect it a little bit, kind of know what we're getting into while we're going to take it apart and do some cleaning and some polishing. And I'll go ahead and say I've already kind of taken a look at it and kind of done a few things as far as like getting the finial unloose. So I do have a little bit of inkiness just because I've used some water to try to unstick a couple things. But I haven't taken the whole thing apart completely, so part of this will be the struggle of an old pen. So let's just go ahead and start taking a look at it just overall. And wow, let me get a little towel and just get that off. Let's see what we're dealing with, seeing how bad that'll come off. Yeah, that's okay, that'll come off. We'll use that as a teaching point. So let's zoom in if I can. Okay, so the finial, it looks like, and I agree, this is the part I did get off. So the finial up here looks like maybe some bite marks or something, a little bit of teeth marks around it, somebody having tried to get it off, and it took me a minute and a little bit of water inside the cap to get this off. So I get their frustration, which is probably why we have the teeth marks. We have the ball clip, and I'll take a peek over the camera. Looks pretty intact. A lot of times you'll see some plating loss around the ball, especially that's where it gets all its rubbing and stuff. So this one actually looks pretty good. It does say Parker. I don't know if I can get it to focus super well, but you can see Parker on there. And aside from my smudginess, which that'll come off a little bit of water, we have the two thin cap bands. Just scrolling through, they look pretty good. No real plating loss, no dents in there, and they're not rolling around. They're pretty secure on there. And that leads to me checking out the cap. This is where you're going to see some hairline cracks, or maybe even chips with some of the older ones. This is where I find a lot of my Parkers will have the most fragility, right here around this cap lip. You'll get a chip off, or the whole darn thing will have a crack in it. So that's always a good place to kind of make sure you're checking out. And I'm putting my finger up just to see if it shows anything that my eye isn't, by making a little bit of a separation, but I don't see anything. So the cap overall looks pretty good. And again, I don't know how well it's showing up for you guys, but it's got the light surface wear, some minor scratches, but nothing super deep. So it looks like that'll polish up really well. And of course the nib looks like it's going to be a fine point. It has a little bit of flex. Maybe, we'll see how she writes. Clean off my fingers. And I'll wait till I clean it up. It looks like it says Parker Duofold on it. Yeah, I don't know if I'm going to be able to get you to see that. But I'm also just kind of checking out, is it cracked anywhere? You know, you can try to look for, and this is a fine point, so there might not be a lot of tipping at all, but you can take your loop and look to see if there's any tipping. Cracks often show up at this little eye hole, keyhole kind of area. It'll just be a little crack that comes off tangentially or obliquely, and that's not a good thing. Now, I'm not a nibsmith. I don't know how to repair anything in regards to nibs. I can do a little bit of straightening if things are a little bit crooked or bent, but I don't have a lot of experience and have not actually been taught how to do anything with nib repair. Another place to look at, especially, I found this out a lot, unfortunately, right at the juncture where the nib and the feed enter this section. I assume because you're getting a lot of writing, if someone's a hard writer, you'll get some good upward pressure that kind of separates it from the feed. And a lot of times there will be a crack there. So if you're not looking for it in the pictures, and sometimes even if you are, you're not going to be able to tell if you're trying to get these things on eBay or someone's personal site. So that we'll see what's going on there once we get it done. Other than that, this is where I was getting stuck. I was trying to pre-do it, but yeah, that section's in there tight, so we'll be playing around with that. We've got some general dirtiness all around, some mild wear, some light scuffs, and let me go ahead and see if I can find the imprint. right there, and it's a little worn. I can make out most of it. And again, I don't know how much I'm going to be able to get you to focus on it. Let me play around for a second, but maybe get it in the glare. Maybe not. I'll get better at this. I'll figure out how to get those in focus better, but you can see a little bit the edges, the ends of the overall GOS Parker and the Made in USA. Oh, this one's made in Canada. Hey, look at that. Are pretty crisp, and the Parker Duofold in the middle, unless we get some polish on it, maybe it'll clean itself up, get some smudginess off. Maybe that'll be a little more crisp, but it's a little bit worn. But not terrible. I think that's actually pretty good. And then of course we have the blind cap. This one's a smooth blind cap. Some of the other ones, sometimes you'll see these little striations, kind of grip lines, so just kind of something to make note of, so that if you're going to polish this and use any kind of abrasive, you might wear off some of the intended grips, which would not be ideal. And there's a little bit of oxidation. It's not like a solid black anymore. There may be a little bit of brownness to it, and I'll zoom back out because I think I keep going off frame. But they're not super black, but maybe it seems lightly. So if we wind up doing some of our polishing with the the micro mesh pads, we might be able to get some of that surface off, and it'll just look a little more dark, and maybe with some polish on it as well, it'll look nice and black. And then of course we have a button, the little brass button filler. And these tend to polish up very nicely, especially with the micro mesh. You'll get these to shine up real nice. And yeah, it pushes. Springy, so that means it definitely has the oh, why am I blanking? It has the pressure bar inside, and actually sounds like it might even be a functional sack. So maybe somebody has not too long in the past actually replaced the bladder. Huh, the sack. Interesting. Oh, pulls right out. That's pretty good, pretty good. And pull out the pressure bar. Nice. Doesn't look too bad. We can clean this up, just make it cosmetic. Nice and springy. That works. And looks like the threads are still pretty good. I mean, that was a pretty solid on there, so good threads overall. So I think the first thing we're going to have to do is get this section off, and I kind of tried to do it just applying some heat, so it's going to take me a little bit of extra time, and maybe I'll throw in a clip of just what I'm doing, because I use my hair dryer. I don't use a heat gun, so I'll show you what I do and just kind of how I kind of try not to do any more damage than I need to. Not that I want to do any damage, but there's a lot of twisting, heating, little gentle pressure, and just doing that over and over and over until it finally comes out. And sometimes, like these can sometimes just be worked out. It may be more difficult on some of the older ones that have the kind of natural lucky curve, the curve of the feed. So those you probably wouldn't want to just automatically try to twist out. And I've also found, maybe not in this because this is a pretty sturdy guy, but if you wind up taking these things out, if they slide out, you get the nib in the feed. If you use things like the section pliers, or you're just really strong and you're squeezing this, some of the cheaper brands, you might actually cave that in and cause a crack in the section just by applying pressure while you're trying to turn and get something out. So I actually tend to leave this in, to leave a core inside the section so that you have something that it can compress against and not just cave in and cause a crack. So these are kind of my first thoughts as I'm just looking over this pen. A few things to clean up, and overall, once we get the section off, I think it'll be really just a good use of good soap and water to get some of this extra ink out. Good hand at polishing, and we'll go back over that. And then we'll get her put back together and see how it writes. So with that, I'll probably just make a cut here, and we'll see you in a few minutes. Okay, so welcome back. I was able to get everything apart, and it took a couple days, And I will actually tell you why I think it was so tight. And I think you can see it, because I can certainly see it with my eye. I can feel it. So if I hold this barrel, you can see that maybe there's a little bit of a different reflection between this little area and here. And there's a little bit of a hump right where I'm running my finger. And maybe you can see it if I give it a little twirl. But yeah, right in there. And so what happened, and I think this happens quite often because I've seen it on other pens, is, well, here's the section. This area from here up, I think it shrunk over time, and so it was very tight and just really grasping on to this area, the threaded area from the section. So I soaked it for a couple days. I used heat, and it took me a couple times, and I definitely wore myself a good blister on this finger trying to turn it. But it finally came loose after just some patience, time, a little bit of heat. And let me just stress that I wasn't here like doing this. This is a lot of little repetitive heat, twist with some pressure. But I didn't want to crack or break anything, and luckily I didn't. But that is going to be living with this barrel from here on out. So just to acknowledge that it is worth being patient and understanding why a little bit that some sections are harder to get out than others. So here's everything taken apart, and I kind of laid it out as it would be. And I know I said before that I tend to leave the nib and feet in, but this one just had enough play in it that I kept knocking and moving it about as I was kind of twisting and kind of moving this nib, that I just, you know what, I'm going to wiggle it out. It came out, but the feed is still securely in there. So I think what I still said is true, but now it's a little bit different because, you know, the nib is out, but I still have the support in the section to be able to squeeze and grip it. Not that I'm using section pliers, but if you were, that is supporting it. So as everything is laid out, we have the finial cap, the clip, the cap itself, we have the barrel, we have the brass button, we have the blind cap, we have the inner pressure bar, and here of course is the section, the feed with, I was right, there was a semi-intact sack. It's intact, but it does not have the springiness. This is not a usable sack, but it was enough so that I could hear some air coming out as I kind of pressed the button before. So let me just go ahead and take this out. And actually, this is good to show, and this is why these were called the lucky curves back in the day, because part of the thing that Parker did to get rid of the kind of, as you held a pen, consider this a full vessel and everything's kind of airtight except for the nib. As you held the pen, that would kind of heat the gas in here, and you would get bubbles kind of wanting to come out the easiest way, and that would push out some ink. So the idea with the lucky curve was to give this a little bit more space to travel and not straight up push ink out. So this was their answer to some of the ink blurbs that would come out with the warming of the air. So that is the lucky curve, and that is also why it is going to be really hard if you were to knock this out, or think about trying to just pull this out the front, that this curve sometimes is going to be impacting on the nipple of this section, and it's going to make it very hard. So it's nice to be able to get this out, see it, and realize that it's actually going to be easier to push it through inside. So I guess I was hoping maybe I'd show you the knockout block with this particular one, but actually sometimes pushing out is not the right way, and you wind up doing it the opposite. So this is how I would actually get out these nice lucky curve with the lucky curve feeds, is by pushing them back in. Okay, so what is my process now? I think everything is apart, and so the next thing I would do is actually make a little bit of solution of water, a little bit of soap, and a little bit of ammonia, because I want to get some of the old residue, some of the old ink off. And I will also say another caveat here: the parts that I would soak and expose to water would be everything but the black and hard rubber. So I would not expose this to water, I would not expose this to water, and I would definitely not expose this to water. And the fees, for some reason, these are ebonite, so these are a little bit different, and I don't know the exact chemistry, but these, I've not had a big problem with submerging them in water and kind of soaking them to get some residue off. Every now and then I have, so I'm not entirely convinced that that's the right thing to do, but it's hard not to put these in water because you want to scrub out a lot of this ink and stuff. So rather than submerging it, sometimes it's better just to take a little bit of soap and water on a brush and just really scrub this out rather than just let it soak. And I want to do another video to show you why we don't want to, because these black and hard rubber parts, and it's really bad when you get like a nice black chased hard rubber old vintage fountain pen, they will oxidize, and the thing that oxidizes them is exposure to air, not sun, not water, but air, because that's the oxidation, that's what's providing the oxygen. But the thing that kind of speeds up the reaction is, of course, heat, which is given by light. Direct light will cause some heat and cause the process to happen faster, and also water, which, you know, that's H2O, there's oxygen in it, and if it's warm water, that reaction of oxidation on the surface of these hard rubber pieces happens really fast, right before your eye, and you'll see it go from, if you had a nice black piece, to a kind of a yellowy brown piece. And I'll see if I can have some old bits to see if I can show you that. But all that to say, these pieces I'm going to actually try to protect from water. And these pieces, just to kind of like soak and get some of the old ink out, I'm going to put these in some water, a little bit of soap, and just a touch of ammonia. And so that'll be the next part where I'm going to go off camera and do that for myself, do a little bit of scrubbing, just with a little bit of some brushes and stuff just to clean it off, and then we'll come back and we'll start the polishing. Okay, so we're back after having cleaned up everything a little bit. I have it all disassembled, and I just kind of brought this over to show that this is the dirty water after using a little bit of ammonia, a little bit of soap, and mostly water. Just like a drop of ammonia just to get like a 10%ish thing going. But what I really used is just toothbrush, where I've cut about half the length of the bristles off. It makes it a little bit stiff. Allows you to get into some of the, you know, the threads of the barrels and the caps and everything, and kind of get into some nooks and crannies, and got a little schmutz in there. And so for all these parts that I kind of separated earlier, they got the drink, and these more hard rubber or ebonite parts, to protect them from the oxidation, I just used a little bit of simichrome polish and just a cloth like this, just to kind of rub them down, give them a little bit of a scrub, and get using a pipe cleaner like this. Can also kind of get into the inner parts of these, and of course this is a great thing to use for the cap. You can also use some Q-tips, which is what I wound up doing for the inside of this, the cap finial. So rather than try to like soak this part in the solution and try to get the ink out, I would dip a Q-tip in there. Sorry, I'm hitting my camera. And I would just kind of go in and clean it out. And it took me quite a few Q-tips, but by and large I think I got it pretty much figured out. And so I just want to point out that some of these pens, I mean, this has like light surface wear, you can see a little bit of pitting, maybe not so much on camera, but I can see it. If you just give them a good wash and scrub down, you can probably get it to a point where you might just be happy with how it looks, and you don't have to go into all the work that I'm about to do it. But if you can get a nice, decently shiny pen that, you know, shows its age and you actually like the character of it, this could be a good place to stop. And here's a picture of the nib. Just kind of got it to shine. That ammonia really kind of gets some of that ink off, and I kind of like it for that reason. So the next part that I will do is I want to polish it. I'm going to take my micro mesh pads, and I want to start to get it looking shiny. So I'm going to take my electrical tape, And anywhere where I see places where I don't want to be a little too aggressive and take anything off, I'm going to cover them up. So for example, I tend to want to protect the gold bands, and I never really polish the lip of the caps because I don't want to press in there, and especially if there's like little cracks or little things you happen to miss, you can wind up breaking the lip. So I always kind of cover it up from here down and just kind of polish away with abandon at the top. And the other thing I'll do, this is easy to avoid, I just won't go over these, but definitely the imprint. I don't want to have to be slowing down just to kind of go around the imprint when I polish, so I will cut out little pieces of tape and cover that up. And is there anything else that I would say to cover up? So the cap, the barrel, this I'm going to go ahead and screw back on and kind of polish as a unit. And this guy too, I'll go ahead and put on so I can polish that. And like I said before, this particular one does not have any like grooves or markings. It's a smooth surface, so I do not feel bad about just going right over it and polishing it with the pads. The section I often do just because I don't, if I put it back in, I have to deal with those. So I wind up just kind of doing it by hand, just kind of running it around. So let me do my little cut and taping, and I'll come back and show you a picture. And we're back, and I have everything taped up, and I went ahead and taped the end, even though I said I wouldn't. I thought, if I'm going to do it, let me show you as much as I can, be conservative and really take care of it, and just show you it's nice to be really extra careful and just gentle with these pens. And for the logo, what I actually did is I kind of cut thin strips to kind of shape right over and only cover the logo and give me as much extra barrel around that imprint that I can to kind of shine up. So this is that piece, and here is the cap with the finial on, and I just went just at the top of where those two thin gold bands were and covered it up all around. So this will allow me to really just go into my polishing with my pads and not have to worry about it and get right up to the edge. So I think the electrical tape is a good way to go. And I'm sorry, I keep bumping my camera. So the next thing I will do is, let me grab my pads. Yeah. So these again are the micro mesh. They go from a nice 1500 all the way through these layers up until ooh, do I have two? Do I have two sets here? No, I don't. I'm sorry. Just got confused for a second. And it goes all the way up through 12,000. So now I've already kind of used this pad on something else. The rest of it is a fresh set. But what I'll do is just all along just work my way from each pad. And I'm going to spend a decent amount of time doing this. I would often just kind of put on a show, let the TV run, or listen to something on the radio or podcast, and I'll just kind of do this for however long it takes. And some of these, actually, to make these pads last longer, I will often have, and I might not do as much now because I don't want to get water on some of these parts that will oxidize. But if you have another type of pen, you can get the piece wet or get this wet, and it'll help preserve the life of these because it'll keep things from sticking within the grains. And these pads are actually good because sometimes I've gone back and just kind of rinsed them off to kind of get some of this buildup out, and it gives them a little bit of a longer life. And like I think I said in the first video, these lower grit ones, they do tend to wear out faster. You'll kind of feel the texture just kind of become more coarse, or I guess less full, less consistent of a pad over time. So extra of these lower grain ones will be good. So this is basically what I'm going to do. I'm going to sit here and polish for as long as it takes to get kind of what I think I can, reasonably do, because some of these little wear marks a little bit deeper than others. Some will disappear, others will be mostly gone. So it's really how much time you want to spend. But this is what I'm going to do, and I'll do a little bit of extra on this. I can take a couple of the coarser pads, just kind of get some of the discoloration off of the pressure bar. And of course, We'll also be doing it for the breast button. That really makes this piece shine, so never neglect the button. But I'll go ahead and say goodbye, and I will come back once I get my initial rough polishing done. Alright, welcome back. I have, in order to make less cuts into the video, I went ahead and did all my polishing with the micro mesh. I did the next thing and I pulled off all my tape to uncover the gold plate and uncover my imprint. I started with my Simichrome again, just polishing a few times over, kind of going over nicely, of course. And then I pulled out a couple other things, and I have these from Anderson Pens. These are some micro polishes. This is a number 5, which goes on first, and then you finish with the number 1, which is very, very fine, clearly. And that's what kind of brings out my final shines. And I think everything turned out really well from the dull orange that it was. And I got out most things. There's still kind of a little bit of wear in there. You know, I'm not trying to file deep into this barrel. You could, but then you run into the issues of, you know, making the surface a little bit uneven. So I did what I think is a pretty decent job. Everything's got a nice shine to it. Even the cap and the blind cap, where there was some oxidation, I think it all came out very beautifully. It's very nice. What else can I say about that? Let me show the nib. Probably get some fingerprints on it now, but the nib came out nice and shiny. And honestly, as I figure out my camera a little bit better, I'll find out ways to kind of zoom in on things and show you. So I apologize if the focus is all over the place. So it came out nicely, and I used all these same polishes on it, so I should have zoomed out first, but there we go. So now I need to get everything together, and the first thing I need to do with this, because the section goes over the feed, I can't just put the sack on, and I can't just slip this into it, because we have the nice lucky curve portion of the feed. So this is going to just undo what we did before and go through. I'll put a little pressure to get it moving, and there it is, butts up against it. And this is the part I play with a little bit. I kind of feed this in there as much as I can and hold it and get it to pop in there, and that just kind of fits in, and I have a little bit more room I can go. There it goes. I've got my feed all the way just about up to the shoulders, and it's a little bit off. I can feel it, so we'll see if I can give the nib a little rotation, give the feed a little rotation. That actually looks pretty good. Okay, yeah, that sits pretty well in there. I've got my lucky curve right there. Oops, sorry, it's there. So now to put the sack on, and I have a pre-cut sack, but what I did was I took my sack sizer, or nipple sizer, I guess, really. I got this from the Pendragons in the UK. Sorry for the glare, trying to focus. And I just walk it along until I get the size, and this one was an 18. So an 18 is a nice tight fit, but what I tend to do, and I picked this up from somewhere, I forget, but I take a size down so that when you slip it on, it's got a little bit of extra tightness to kind of hold onto that nipple with the shellac. And so this one I actually already pre-cut, and I should have done this on camera, but we'll do it for the next time. But this is one that I've sized by sticking the sack, hitting the bottom, knowing that I need to subtract a little bit of the section. So my sack was cut to the edge. I line up my section and realize I have to take this, account for this area, and then I cut down to there. So it's a lot of putting my thumbs and holding it where I'm going to cut it, then cut it down a little bit lower. After the next part I mark, and I'll do this better, but this is my crappy way of saying it out loud, but this is the sack I'm going to use. And I don't know where my forceps are, so I'm going to do an alternate method of putting this sack on. So I've got my shellac, also from Anderson Pen. This is a clear shellac. And get some on the brush. And I'm going to avoid getting it on this, but I'm going to put dots of shellac all the way around on the nipple. Like I said, I don't want to get it onto the feed itself because I don't want to block the channel. But there we go. And since I don't have my forceps, I'm going to do probably an okay but less ideal way of doing it. I'm going to, knowing that my feed channel is right on top here, I'm going to take the sack, kind of go to the bottom, and then see if I can do it. There we go. Work it onto the nipple. So not the best way of doing it, but I looked over for my forceps and I just don't find them. And I'll show it a better, correct way later. So I'm going to give this a little bit of rotation. Let it make sure that's gonna get all the shellac evenly distributed between the sack and the nipple. And by me holding it and doing all this, I'm actually kind of spreading a little bit of shellac. And sometimes I do this extra. I'll put another little bead kind of right there and just kind of let that go around the upper portion where the top of the sack is, and just kind of really seal it. And I'm going to be careful, reach over the camera for a second to wipe it off the threads a little bit, because I don't really want it to be too gummed up because I had such a hard time getting it undone. So there it is. And of course I would let that sit and dry for a while, but we're going to press on and put it together. Get some of this off my fingers, and that's kind of why it's not good. And now I have to get this off my fingers, so I'm going to be handling it. But this is the time where you go ahead and put this back. There we go. Do this off camera because it's awkward to hold over the camera. And actually, what I think I might do, because I had, well, yeah, it's kind of doing that rubbing thing. I'm actually gonna go off camera and pause it, although I said I wouldn't. I'm gonna apply some heat to this little area, get it to open back up, so it's easier for me to twist this on, and I don't risk cracking because it is rubbing, and it's not like a smooth, easy operation right now. So I will use a little heat, try to get that to expand, and then finish up. And we're back, and that was the right move, I should say. Once I put a little heat, that thing twisted it right on, nice and smooth. No cracks, good pen. Okay, so next thing we'll do is we'll take the pressure bar, and this is the way you would do it. So the pressure bar is nice, and this is the original, and it's still in good springy condition. So if I were to slip this up in there, this slides along the side, and every time you press the button, it would spring this forward, and that's what pushes against the sack, pushing it against the wall. And when you release the button, boom, it opens, creates the suction to draw the ink into the sack. So let's go. So you turn upside down. This little narrow taper end is what's going to be sticking out, and the button will be slipping over. So we slip this in, pushing it to the side. Be careful, you don't want to put a hole in the sack. And slip it in. Boom. And I realized just as I'm doing this that I forgot to put talc in my sack, but for the sake of not undoing and redoing, I'm just going to go press forward. So what I would have done is, and I will undo this after the camera, but I will take this back off, coat the sack in talc to help it keep it from sticking to the barrel or to the pressure bar, and that just keeps it lasting longer and be a little bit fresher. So I will do that after this, and I apologize, I should have done it. But there we go, we've met resistance at the section. We have a little bit of the tip sticking out, and we can take this now nice and shiny brass button and slide it over that, stick it in, and actually this is a good point. Let me find my knife. show you what I would do. So that button now will slip in and out easily, which may be fine. But if you see, there are grooves. Let's see if I can get you to focus it. There are these grooves, like an X in there. So if you take a little blade or anything really, just kind of stick it in and wedge it down, you're effectively spreading those tines with a little lip at the end. So I'm going to spread them out a little bit in both planes. There you go. So that's opened it up a little bit, and that will let me go back over, press it in, maybe do it a little bit more. That's still pretty easy. I'm not going to do too much. Of course I'm going to be pulling on this. I'm going to go open up a bit more, and if this is still a little bit easy to get off, I'll leave it. Yeah, and it actually is, but maybe that's a good thing. As long as it stays in there and I can press. Bounces right back. So in my mind, that's good. I'm not going to worry anymore. But that is the way you would want to tighten it up in case you had one that was really just loose. This one's actually pretty good. Put my blind cap on. Okay, set that aside. We'll zoom back out so you can see. And I will take my clip, my finial, and do a good screw on. And I don't know if it matters or not, but I like to put the ball or the clip in between the two holes. I'll just tighten that down and just play with it till I think I get it where I like. That's actually pretty good. I don't want to be too aggressive, but that's good, I think. And so we have a nice duofold. And I'll do one last thing before I shut the camera off. I'll tell you what I'll do. I won't do it in front of you. Again, don't need to bore you. But I'm going to come back, put a little Renaissance wax on it, and I'll just do the cap just to show you how much you do or don't really need. This stuff will melt almost on contact, so I basically just touch my finger in there. It's got a little shine on the end of it. Actually got a little piece of it. But I'll just spread it all along, and I probably should have done this in pieces, but I can make it work. I can move that a little bit, get under there, bring it back, and just work it all over. And I'll do the same with the barrel. So with that, I will say goodbye, and we'll come back to talk a little bit about this Duofold Junior, and we'll do a little writing sample and we'll talk about it. And we're back. Everything's put together. And we're here to talk about the pen, so I can show it off a little bit better in all its glory, get some light on it. Everything has turned out so nice. There's still a few marks on it, like some not gouges, but some deeper scratches and some wear and tear that I wasn't quite able to get off in this area here. There's, yeah, a little bit of teeth marks. Somebody was probably just idling with the pen. Hopefully they weren't just trying to get the cap off, or the cap clip off. But yeah, I think this one might be one for me. I don't know if I would pass this one on to somebody, but if I just find that I'm not using it quite so much, maybe I'll find it another home. But overall, this one cleaned up really well. I'm really happy with it. So let's get down to the brass tacks about it. I pulled out my ruler. And from what I could figure out on the internet, just doing searching a couple sites, this is the Streamlined version, which that was clear, hopefully early on, because rather than have the kind of more distinct step off with a curve both here and the more straight flat top ridged cap topper, I keep calling it like 5 different things. This is more in line with the barrel. It's kind of tapered with it. It doesn't have the ridges. Same down here. Again, no ridges. Everything's very streamlined and just aerodynamic in a way. So this is probably around 1930. The Streamlines came out in 1929, so this is 1930 give or take, but also from the imprint, this one is made in Canada, and I also found that outside of the US, the UK and Canada, these kind of persisted a little bit longer, probably up until 1940, so this is probably in the 1930s to 40s. So at this point, we're dealing with maybe an 80 to 90-year-old pen. So this is, I think, fantastic. So let me get that ruler back. And if we were to say, lay this down, we'll do the inches. And lay it down capped from top to tip. It's about 4.5 inches. If we were to do it uncapped, we'll lay it down and it looks like about 4 1/4 inches. And if we were to say, let's see how wide this thing is. Looks to be about 1/2 inch. Very even numbers, very good. And again, I'm going to apologize for the angle. I don't have the biggest setup, and I'll start working on it to figure out how to do this better. But let's go ahead and do some writing. And to do that, we'll fill. And I'm going to use something that kind of matches this nice, even though it's supposed to be a red, this orangey color. I'm going to use blood orange, so kind of meet it halfway in between. So I'm going to take the cap off, take my blind cap off, and I will see if we can get a good bubble sound. Tilt it. Oh yeah, that's a good fill. That was nice. Take this off camera. I'll give it a wipe. Get the extra off. Yeah, good, good, good. I'll come back with a blind cap on. So here we go. Let's see how it writes. So, and I'll write now, and I'll zoom out so you can maybe watch a little bit, and then I'll turn the paper so you can see. And sorry for all the shadows. So here we go. Let's say this is a Parker Duofold Junior. This is the Streamline version. This is about 1929 was when they came out, and this is Canadian, so we'll say anywhere from there until about 1940. And the nib didn't help me date it. I didn't really find a lot about dating Canadian nibs, and this doesn't have a number. It just says Parker Duofold Pen P-C, so pen company maybe, I'm not sure, but it doesn't give me exact to see if this is the original nib to the pen, so I don't know how to account for that. But let's see, and I will say this is very smooth. Nice fine tip. It's smooth in any direction I write, up, down, left, right with the swirls. And it is a little bit of a wet writer. It slides nicely on this rhodia paper, so I get a little, there we go. It's a wet writer for sure. And it does have a little bit of a spring, so let's give it a little figure 8. It does open up a bit. You can get a little bit of flex. I wouldn't call this a flexible writer, but if you put a little pressure, you get a little something out of it. Yeah, I like this guy. I think overall pretty solid. And let me cap this for you. I will turn the paper so you can see a little bit better. Get my ink since it's over here too. And let me turn the paper. Sorry, I keep bumping my camera. See if I can zoom in and get us a better look. So yeah, it writes wonderfully well. I think this would be a keeper for me or for anyone, to be quite honest with you. And thank you for watching. And please leave some comments about things you liked, things you didn't like. Help me make this a page that you would love to come back to. And let me see if I can actually tease, because I said a pen. In my plan to kind of show my restoration, I wanted to kind of go through some of the different filling mechanisms first. And I don't have any lever filled Parkers or Parkettes or anything like that right now. So although I wish I could stay with the brand, I found that next best thing maybe, and hopefully those aren't fighting words to people. But I have this lovely Schaefer balance in commando colors. Some green that's turned to brown because this is an older one, so it's got a little oxidation, but I figure we could get this guy back into working order. Yeah, it's got a little stiffness in there. So even though it looks pretty good on the outside, it needs a little bit of love. And so we'll learn about lever fillers next time.